Hi everyone, welcome back to Fractured and another edition of our special segment called Disinfo Watch. Today we actually have a very special guest with us who's kind of the reason why we created the Disinfo Watch in the first place. I don't know if he knows this, but one of our good friends, Nick Muller, who is a freelance journalist based out of Berlin, who is a regular contributor to the Diplomat and tons of other publications. Really, really wonderful guy. He is kind of the reason why we decided to create this. So, Nick, it's really wonderful to have you on the show, and thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I don't know if you actually haven't had a chance to meet yet, but this is Rasheed. He's our co-host and one of our powerhouses here in the Athens lab. He's also a stand-up comedian, so
I'm a powerhouse.
he will make you laugh.
Yeah, I was a powerhouse.
He does everything, and again, another reason, like we were saying earlier, like my conversations with you back in the fall, granted, two Americans lamenting over the dismay and the chaos that was leading into the election cycle. We were really starting to talk a lot about all of these kind of chaotic things online and how it was influencing real life. And this kind of gave us this impetus when we came back here to say, let's start making some other type of content that would still be related to the topics we discuss about migration, human rights, freedom of movement, all these types of issues that are facing real people, but how the information is skewing this and modifying this. And so we thought nobody better than you to have on the show, since this is this work you're doing outside of your own journalism. You're also a third-party independent fact checker. You're kind of, unfortunately, every day of the week you're living inside this kind of thing that everyone calls a cesspool of bad misinformation, disinformation. And I remember your coffee seemed to be a bit sweeter than the news you were reading on a regular basis. So we're happy to have you here, and we would love to kind of dive into that early, maybe the motivations for you as to why you started diving into this type of work. What got you going?
Well, I think, yeah, my engagement in combating disinformation and fact checking probably comes from a lot of the types of stories that I cover. So I cover a lot of stories related to migration and climate stories, and also how different some topic spans two different parts of the world. And I think especially with migration and climate and environment, there is so much mistrust and swirling of crazy information out there that especially when I talk to people, whether I'm reporting or just talking to people about what I do, I understand that a lot of people just don't even believe that some of these things are real, or that they're issues, um, or that journalists are telling the truth about it. So I think, yeah, a lot of, like, these are two of the main topics, I think, which people who are putting out crazy misinformation, disinformation, they really are like trying to undermine like the public's trust about what is actually going on. And then so they offer then their own versions of what they think is actual reality, or they take things out of context to sensationalize things, or to, yeah, make people believe that they're whether it's crossing the, like, whether we're talking about the U.S. Mexico border, where people are running across the border, or whether it's between Turkey and Greece, where people think that just boats and boats are coming, or whatever part of the world. People have this very skewed understanding, or this misunderstanding of how migration works, and also what is actually happening, because they're not there. So yeah. And the last thing is, like, living in the last few years, I've been living in Russia, Turkey, and China, and all of these countries, they really have their own ambitions in terms of trying to promote like their version of the world. So like in Turkey, you have TRT World. In China, you have like CGTN, which is like really trying to shape their own narrative. And you have also RT, of course, which operates not only in Russian, but they operate in Spanish and Arabic and so many different languages. And I regularly see so many different narratives which start often from them and then like swirl out into 10 different languages often. And then these things are picked up in completely different parts of the world and then end up in the United States. So, yeah.
Actually, I was forgetting that you speak all these languages too, and that you, and I'm
Oh,
thinking,
wow.
oh my God, you're getting hit with like fake news and all this crazy information in all these
Many
languages. And I'm like,
languages.
how do you even like smile on a daily basis? Like this is kind of nuts. Like this must be pretty depressing to read this kind of stuff and see where and how the type of impact it has. I remember you mentioned TRT, and I remember when we worked on Lesbos during the times of COVID, and the media wasn't really allowed in, and so they were doing a lot of work with us because we had trained journalists inside. And TRT approached us to do a project, and then afterwards we agreed to do it with them. And then the director gets in touch with me and he gives me the shot list, and this was the shot list that was like crying child, boy fighting with police, police throwing tear gas at children. Like they had a whole like scripted list of things they wanted, and we're like, we're not. No, we're not shooting that. We're not gonna go find that shot, even if that's happening. We're not gonna do
Okay.
that. And then so in the end, we politely declined to do the work. They basically were like, if you don't give us these shots, then why would we run the report? And I was just like, okay, this is just straight up propaganda shit. Like
Wow.
some of that stuff
Scary.
is happening, but not the way that they were trying to present it, And they want it like on call, like go create it, go stage it. So it was a little kind of nuts. But
Scary.
maybe a little connection question to this was how do you see the difference between what was happening in Russia, in Turkey, and China to what's now happening in Europe and America? How does this type of thing unfold similarly or different?
Yeah, I mean, I think there, like the common thread is, I mean, obviously in China you haven't ever really had a free media space, but in Russia and Turkey, like the media spaces have been quickly degraded. So like obviously it's the same playbook which is playing out in the US, is trying to go after the media, antagonizing any sort of normal reporting, which I mean, we can talk about what normal reporting is, but like the traditional big outlets who have always been there. And so, like, first antagonizing them. And so, yeah, in Russia and China, they've gone from a pretty free media space, let's say 20 years ago, uh, to now just one narrative. And like foreign reporters are still a little bit allowed in Turkey, but I don't really have any confidence that that's going to last too long, considering what's happening right now. But in Russia, like the media space shrank and shrank and shrank. Media outlets were closed down, journalists were arrested, and then foreign reporters were finally arrested, which was kind of the last straw after the war started. But yeah, so I'm pretty confident that that could play out in the U.S., considering the antagonism you see from this administration towards journalists, and also inviting in like um, influencers and right-wing
Yeah, this is crazy.
partisan outlets into the White House, which don't follow the rules of fact-checking and journalism. So
Yeah, the AP is not allowed in because they don't want to say the Gulf of America.
Really?
But
Just because of that?
like people who are yeah, like banned, and then but you got a
Mhm.
Russian state television in the White House in the Oval Office. It's like what the fuck? Like what are
Yeah,
you
it's
doing?
crazy.
Go
Uh,
Rasheed, go.
Nick, when Doc told me about your job, I didn't believe him. I thought he was joking with me, like a fact checker. What's that? But also because of I really wanted this maybe job to happen, and I just didn't figure out how. I want to ask you, how do you get a job like this? I mean, I'm thinking like many people would go, how do you like someone offered you this, or you said, hey, I'm gonna be this, I'm gonna follow it. How do you get it?
yeah, just some by with some other journalists, I joined a fact-checking organization. Um, and yeah, it's yeah, different journalists from around the world, and so it sort of happened by accident, but I'm really happy that it happened, because I think it really helps me, for one, understand these kind of narratives which a lot of people who read, let's say, normal information, sort of dismiss. Um, but it also helped me with a lot of new tools in terms of like helping my own reporting. So when I go out and do a story and then I'm doing information gathering, or I'm doing the research afterwards, it also really helps me just be a better journalist as well. So yeah, I think it really, really helps and just makes me a lot more critical and thorough in terms of the reporting that I'm doing. And yeah, I mean, it takes some time to, you know, go through, I mean, get better and better at this job. But I think now I can really look at, so if whether it's a news segment or influencer or whoever is in some video clip, I can really take out the main claim and understand, like, okay, is this fact? Is this opinion? Uh, does this smell like nonsense? And so you can really develop that very quickly, and then yeah, it makes you a better journalist. So yeah.
It sounds like a cool job, but dog, we were like, no. For me, it's a cool job, to be honest. But one of the things I was thinking about, how do you find the balance between the need for free speech and the need to protect people from false information? Because there is a line there, and many people don't know how to navigate.
Yeah, so I think you have sort of two approaches. Obviously, in the US, you have had traditionally for a long time basically no limits on free speech. But now you see that sort of being tested now with the new administration for people who are being critical of certain topics. And on the other side, in Germany, I also see, where I live, it can also be sometimes a bit too much in terms of really policing speech quite heavily in ways which I think, yeah, just coming from the US, I think are quite excessive. So I think like the better balance is just to really have like you have to really make sure that you can safeguard free expression without like allowing just these super hateful and defamatory, violent rhetorics just to circulate, because that's really, really popular now. It's popular in Germany, it's popular everywhere, and a few of these actors, like also in the UK, it's been like really normalized. And so once you have those things like out of the box, it's very hard to put them back in. So like most European countries have limits on that. Some, as I said, they take it sometimes, I think, a little bit too far. But in a country like Germany, you understand why they have had laws like this. But another thing which I just came across recently, actually, so I was at a conference last week in a place called Publix. So they have a lot of like journalism like workshops there and conferences, and there was a lady who goes around Europe. It's called an organization called Lie Detectors, and so they're going like around schools to teach little kids in like several different languages, like just basic media literacy. And so that gives me, some hope that like at least kids who are maybe not so partisan, like people who are our age or older, or maybe a little bit younger, they can like learn how to really critically evaluate information and, really understand how to differentiate between like fact and opinion, which I think for a long time, I really sort of underestimated people's I sort of, I sort of thought that like most people understand the clear difference between fact and opinion, but actually, so many of these things, whether they're media outlets like RT or TRT or CGTN, they mix like, and also even like outlets like Fox News, they're often like really confusing viewers to not understand clearly, like, is this commentary that you're watching? Is this factual reporting that you're watching? Is this a mix? Is it total nonsense? And so like I think that it's a super cool initiative that, like, at least for kids who are, I don't know, at age 10, they're doing this in different European countries and different European languages. And yeah, also, I think that obviously there has to be fact checking in some form. I don't know what form that's going to take. I don't know how it's going to look like in a few years, but obviously, like, European countries are going to need to continue investing in fact checking. I don't know whether that's going to come from the platforms themselves, or if it's going to come from other kinds of funding, or if it's going to come from a EU initiative. But like, yeah, there are some things, and because without it, like, this stuff is just going to run wild, especially where you have like algorithms which are designed for amplifying popular misinformation narratives. So
I'm so jealous of those kids. They are
Yeah,
learning from a
seriously.
young age. I remember when I was a kid growing up in Algeria, I remember I was 12 and I saw 9/11, and then in the TV, they were celebrating it. So this is, and then Saddam Hussein and stuff like that. So we got a lot of shit. So now I'm just unpacking with the psychologists. I'm like, is this good? No, throw it away. Like, it's too much. Like this organization, like, it's amazing. The lie detectors, you said? The name of the organization? Wow, that's amazing work.
We
So
should get them on the show.
yeah.
Talk about what they're doing.
So okay, so these kids are safer maybe. What about, an average?
let's hope so. I don't know.
uh,
I don't know, because I mean, most of they say that most of the kids are there they're literally just from day to night watching things on social media and just not reading any sort of news. And so
Yeah.
yeah, it's still a question about how it evolves, but yeah, at least there's some form of media literacy education there.
What advice do you give to a normal person who's starting now, wants to protect themselves from this false information? How can they start? How can they learn to protect themselves?
Um, yeah, I mean, even though I do this like every day for my work, I just still like, when I look at some claim, some piece of information, you just need to step back and like think about it just for a second. Okay, could this possibly be true? Is it outrageous? And then yeah, you need to then look at, I mean, I rely on like trusted sources, so I always go to, different news wires and um, different outlets like the New York Times and the Washington Post and things like that, to see like, okay, has this been written about? And I think the first clue you can really find, like, okay, this story is very unlikely true, is if you literally cannot find it anywhere on the internet. And if you don't find it anywhere, or if you find it just like on some, I don't know, on just some social media posts, I would immediately put like a red flag towards that. But then, yeah, I mean, there are so many, like, I use so many different tools in terms of fact checking. It depends. Like, if I'm looking at an image, I'm doing a reverse image search by screenshotting the image and then running it through like through the Google search, which has a certain search tool in terms of doing a reverse image search. But yeah, I mean, just as in traditional journalism, if you need multiple sourcing on anything. So if you are looking at something which doesn't have more than one source, it's very likely to be either unverified at the very least, or more likely to be misinformation. So yeah, just go through the main sort of channels, I think, first. But that also takes a certain trust, I think, which we can debate whether this is broken or not. But like, I think at the very least, like, relying on like reputable media organizations, which have been long-standing, who have long traditions of reporting, who have like vigorous fact-checking themselves, it's the right way to start.
Okay, I'm trying to figure out where to go next, because you just said so many things in the middle of the last 15 minutes that we could talk for several hours here about these different tributaries that come off this main thoroughfare. And it's like maybe the difference between mis and disinformation, because in my opinion, I feel like just using the word misinformation kind of gives some people a get out of jail free card, as if like, oh, we didn't really mean it like that, versus this is like deliberately, like, can you just call this shit lies for what it is? Like, it's like deliberate lying. and it's monetized. So, in your perspective, like, what's the difference between mis and dis?
Yeah, disinformation is uh, misrepresenting of the facts, and really trying to inform the viewer in a way with bad information, and misinformation is not always the case. I mean, sometimes it's like either just shoddy reporting, not a good enough understanding of the issue, or just like relying on some bad sources, not purposely trying to make the viewer understand it differently. So yeah, that's the main. It's like disinformation is purposeful, and misinformation is not always purposeful. It's there is a difference. So yeah.
And I know that, right now I feel like pretty much every society tries to romanticize some sort of golden era or a past where things were better than they are now, because now there's just this kind of chaos. It's not organized at all. But like, if you think back to journalism when we were growing up in the States, or maybe when I was growing up in the States, and I like out myself for my age, it was like Dan Rather and Tom Brokaw, and like these guys were like seen as like the trusted voice of news. Before that, it was like Walter Cronkite and Murrow and like this. But this is always presented as an era of really trusted, serious journalism, serious news reporting. But the thing back then was that everyone was getting their information from three sources. Just, three major broadcasts that were kind of putting out the same story. It was essentially verified information, but it was definitely pushing a particular, almost like unified stream of information, versus what we have now with the internet, and kind of like everyone is able to publish. So it's a stark difference. But I do remember there was a time when Dan Rather got I forget, I think it was on NBC at the time, or maybe it was CBS. They got a story wrong, and they had a source that was about George Bush, the second one, the president in the 2000s, and he, they had someone who basically lied, and it like tore down the viability, or like the trustworthiness of this report. And then on air, they're like apologizing for it.
Really?
And Dan Rather like took the bullet for this. Back then, like he lost his station after 30 years in journalism. He was out.
He was fired?
Basically, like because of this one report. And I'm just like imagining now, like compare it to what's happening right now, where every day it's a prison hose of lies. And there's seemingly no consequence for it. So I don't know. Like, that's a long-winded question, which would be, there was a period of time when seemingly everything was fine. Then there was social media and internet, and then they had some guardrails on that you referenced that the European countries would have to put on to ensure safety. Now we don't even have those, because as of January, Meta is pulling away from fact checking from third-party sources, and so now they just want to leave it to the people. So maybe the short question is, what is your dystopian view of where we're going, considering where we came from?
I think the dystopian view is already visible. I mean, all you have to do is open Twitter. So you can see what Twitter used to be before Elon Musk took it over, which was a fairly reliable platform for journalists to exchange a lot of their reporting and a lot of pretty reputable information, whether from journalists or public officials. Of course, there was a lot of also unverified false stuff on there, but it was generally a source of community and debate, which was obviously not perfect, but was pretty good. And then you saw the way that it was dismantled. So I think that probably, I guess the nightmare scenario is that if every single platform is going to look like that, so from what Meta did in terms of pulling their fact checking from. So we think about Facebook, but it's also Instagram. So it's several different generations of people who are involved in this. I mean, like the older generation is obviously using Facebook more than younger people, but yeah, so I'm afraid that Instagram and Facebook are both going to look like that, and just like Twitter does. Yeah, and the question is are you going to have other reputable platforms which are going to emerge? I mean, Blue Sky looks promising, but it's still sort of not. Yeah, it's sort of functioning in the way that Twitter was functioning in the very beginning. So we can see maybe that there's some possibility there, but TikTok is sort of misinformation on steroids compared to a lot of these other platforms, just because of the way the algorithm works. And yeah, like one time I clicked on some video that I was fact checking, and I just like double clicked on it, so I liked the video. And then after that, whenever I open TikTok, it just shows me this kind of content. So, I mean, as far as I understand, basically someone can be sort of radicalized, like watching TikTok within basically 30 minutes. So the more videos that you like and you watch, the more that you get. So I think that this is gonna just deepen the misinformation space, especially if there's no coordinated or if there's no fact checking, because obviously actors like Russia and China are going to only continue to put on like even more sophisticated disinformation campaigns in multiple languages, and the public is already confused, so like there is partially a confusion, but there's already this sort of like mistrust, which these kind of outlets really amplify. And you see that they use particular issues like migration or about climate or about whatever it can be to really polarize the society. And obviously the goal is to really erode trust. So yeah, I think that if this continues to go unchecked, like, I don't know, I think it really goes hand in hand with, because people are really now primarily getting their information from these platforms, which I would not wish would continue, but that's what's happening. That is only going to further erode the trust in actual reliable journalism. So if there's not some sort of intervention, then I don't know how like traditional journalism, as we've seen it for the last decades, will continue to exist. So,
well, shit. I don't think we can end an episode like that. So we definitely wanted to talk to you a lot longer than just 30 minutes. So we're going to take a quick pause and keep going. But just to cap this episode for everyone who's watching at home on Spotify or YouTube, we would really love your support to keep Fractured going. We have wonderful supporters, and from Aperture in Europe to Choose Love, Leave No One Behind, Allianz Foundation, which created the podcast through a fellowship. But the average individual like yourself are the ones who are really making this possible. So we really need your support on Patreon and in any other ways to ensure that we can continue to report these important stories. We'll be right back with a little bit more with Nick Muller from fact-checking, information, and all sorts of potentially dystopian realities. Talk soon.